So, welcome to the lecture on the Levitikon. My name is Father Donald Donato, and I'm the rector of St. Sarah's Parish in Boston. But I'm here today as the translator of the Levitikon, which came out a couple of years ago, 4 years ago. And that section of the Levitikon that we're discussing, that was published already, is the Gospels according to the primitive church, which is actually the second section of the entire corpus. But before I start to talk about the details and the background and all the interesting French people who are involved in this book, I'd like to bring it to a human level. We're sitting in a building that was built by the Senecal sisters. And the Senecal sisters were founded by Saint Thérèse Couder. And they were devoted in the aftermath of the French Revolution to rejuvenating the religious and spiritual life of France. Those sisters would have been working in very much the same time period that this book and the Johannite Church was born. So it's very important to remember that in the wake of the disaster that was the French Revolution, mayhem that followed for a decade, there were people who were walking around the countryside of France trying to establish, to dust things off, to help the poor and the sick and the people who had not been served very well by chaos. There was a renewed interest in spirituality, and there was no distinction between religion and spirituality. So the two institutions, the Johannite Church and the Senecal Sisters, are born literally like a phoenix from the ashes of the French Revolution. Ironically, neither of the two institutions would exist probably today had it not been for the revolution, because it was illegal for the Johannites to exist outside of the royal court in secret, and the Senecal Sisters didn't exist because there was no need for what they did in the aftermath of the revolution. So it's very fitting that we talk about the Levitikon in that context, that it's not just a bunch of words on a page, it's a chain of people who have made it possible. So I'll start, first of all, just by clarifying that the name itself comes from Levi or Levi, which means priest in Hebrew, but it also means joined to others, which is very much what we do. So this is a book of the priests, or it can also be called the book of the Levites, or a book of people who want to be joined to others. Depends on how you want to read it.
Father, is it all right if we ask questions?
I'd like to go through first, and then we'll come to a point here. I'm going to read to you something that Dr. Fabre-Palaprat wrote in 1831. He said, he was speaking of the Levitikon. Thus, by stating that it recognizes as authentic the Gospels which have come to us from St. John, books which we have in all purity, the Church does not say that it rejects other books. It only means that it rejects those things within any books that is impious, immoral, wrong, and absurd. To insist on a subject, such as the details of this book, would somehow be an affront to the sanctity of our belief, is to ignore the conclusions of our principles. That is why we recall that our Church defends, by means of a special law, the right to discuss and question all doctrine, and we will not allow ourselves to violate that law by abandoning such a wise principle as allowing discussion, and rely only on the dialectic of someone's conscience. So, fabre-palaprat, in many ways, has just given you the structure by which the Apostolic Johannite Church works, which is freedom of conscience and belief on the one hand, and yet an enormous corpus of liturgical rules and regulations that all sacramentalists share. But for me, I think that as the translator, those words by Dr. Fabre-Palaprat pretty much sum up what the entire corpus means to me. It's not merely the tolerance of free inquiry, but the codification of love. Its pages divulge more than the wedding of Jewish and Egyptian mysticism. They are filled with the continuity and convergence of Platonism, with 20 centuries of philosophical speculation, both Catholic and Roman. However, this work has been long abused. In the words of my friend Boris Balkan, mumbo jumbo, mumbo jumbo. That's pretty much what's been written about this book in the last 100 years or so. But what was once shrouded in overwrought speculation, along with the Johannite Church itself, it now offers us a sort of majestic theater in which love, that most mysterious of cosmic powers, is presented as protagonist in the drama of theurgy and across the stage of humanity. When you look at the barbarity that happens between 1682 and 1812, the letters of this book and the tradition that it represents is filled with human blood. Just to be able to discuss freely was something that was, new and cherished. Now, I want to take it back a little bit and tell you a little bit about Dr. Fabre-Palaprat. Bernard Raymond Fabre-Palaprat was, as many of you know, the patriarch and sovereign pontiff of this church. He was also the Grand Master of the Order of the Temple. But a lot of people don't know that he was a provincial boy. He grew up in Conclave, which is a town very close to the Spanish border in the south. It's in the canton of Albi, which is where the Albigensians come from, the Cathars. So his name, even Bernard Raymond, are very Cathar names. They're very, Count Raymond was, one of the people who supported the Cathars. So, his life and the culture that he lived in certainly hadn't forgotten the ideas and ideals of the Cathars. And some who were wealthy risk takers actually had continued the Cathar tradition in secret. Now, this is a well-documented fact in the south of France, that wealthy people had hidden rooms. Catharism continued after the persecution. But did he? There's no evidence of that. There's every reason to believe that he was a devout Roman Catholic. He went to seminary and became a priest. But I mention his life because it just so happens that he's finishing formation in the Roman Catholic priesthood in the 1790s, the 1780s, when it wasn't very popular, or if you wanted to keep your head, to be a Catholic priest. So, in the spirit of the times, you could say, he made the decision to go to medical school, which he finished, and became a medical doctor with a specialty in podiatry. He later moved on to the use of electricity in medicine. But this kind of idea of finding in himself something of worth, not only in the ritual tradition, yes, that's a very important part of Dr. Fabre-Palaprat, but also having the ability to look at the world, embrace it, and to join to others. This is his life, without a doubt. So by 1814, when the enemies of France had invaded and nearly destroyed Paris, he was out in the field, in the streets, taking care of the wounded. And for that, because of his valiant efforts as a medical doctor, in 1814 he was given the highest civilian and military order in France, Legion of Honor. So the founder of our church, or at least in its modern formation, is someone to be enormously proud of. And you can tell by the way he writes, in the passage that I just read to you, that he valued both tradition and respect and dignity on the one hand, and the ancients, and on the other hand, the practical application of that in his own life, and also in the government of the church. So that as much as he liked fantastic pants, as we say, he also allowed people to discuss freely and to believe freely. And that's a very, I could say, it's a Masonic way of looking at things, no doubt about that. So, but there is a great degree of